Hi, I'm Rachel. Welcome to my channel. This is an additional midweek video on a Wednesday in addition to my Saturday videos. If you watch my channel regularly, you'll know that I have been reading Less by Patrick Grant. I finished it and I promised that I would do a review, and here it is. So, Less by Patrick Grant. So the premise is by less, by better, by local, and I'm going to begin my review by reading a quote from the review from the Daily Telegraph, because I think it's a really good sort of summing up. Excuse me looking down. A deep dive into our relationship with consumerism, the toxic effects of fast fashion and the demise of British industry. It's a really thought-provoking book, and it's made me question my own consumer behaviour, my own purchasing, the reasons why I buy things. And I will talk a bit more about that at the end, because I have made myself a mini manifesto, which I'm hopefully going to move forward with to change my habits. So, first of all, let's talk about Patrick Grant and who he is. If you live in the UK, you will be familiar with the Sewing Bee, and you will know he is the presenter of the Sewing Bee alongside Esme Young. He was born in Edinburgh, Scotland. He's described as a businessman, clothier, author and TV personality. Currently he is the director of Community Clothing, a business which he also founded. Very interesting. It's about clothing rather than fashion, and I've put a link below to the website, and they've also got a really good Instagram feed that you can follow to find out more about Community Clothing if you wish. In addition to that, previously he has rejuvenated a Savile Row tailoring business called Norton and Son, and he also relaunched a business called Etorts and Sons, which was menswear ready to wear. He received in 2010, I believe, Menswear of the Year award, and he has also in the past worked with Debenhams. Now Debenhams, if you're not from the UK, you may not be familiar with Debenhams. It was an old department store chain which unfortunately closed in 2021, although I believe now they function online, but it's completely different. So he had a range within the Debenhams stores called Hammond & Co, and it was extremely successful, but since the stores closed, the range is no longer. In addition, he purchased a historical British manufacturing company called Cookson and Clegg. They're a clothing manufacturer established in 1860, and they are still going, and they manufacture outerwear, jeans and chinos for UK brands. So alongside all of this, he's known as a critic of fast fashion and the implications of fast fashion. So hence, I guess, the reason for the book Less. And I believe that he actually, the starting point maybe came from a TED talk that he did a while ago. I think it was just a 10-minute TED talk, and I think that's where the idea sprung from. So just to give you an overview of the book and the structure of it, as well as an introduction and a conclusion, it's in 4 main parts covering want, quality, work and less. It also has an Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. Appendix 1 is a list of British artisan makers, not just clothing, but furniture, ceramics, and many other things, which is really interesting to look at. And Appendix 2 outlines the key points that he made in a lecture to the Royal Geographical Society in 2021. I quote, about making high value, low consumption products locally, which is sort of the gist of the book. Okay, so that's the main structure of the book. At the very beginning of the book, even before the introduction, he has an additional chapter, a short chapter, and it's titled Happiness. And I think it's one of my most favourite bits of the book, because it gives you an insight into Patrick Grant and the things that make him tick, the things that he particularly likes, his background, his relationship with stuff as he was growing up, And I just feel it really, really sets the scene and the tone for the book. Start with talking about want and how we went, I quote, how we went from needing very little to wanting everything. So he basically tackles the very beginnings of consumerism and reflects back on how a once simple existence became far more complex with a shift from need to want. And I guess this change started in the Industrial Revolution, which would have been, I suppose, mid-1700s. And it was a point at which some already quite wealthy people realised that they could make even more money by making and selling stuff that other people, although they realised they didn't need these items, they wanted them. So this whole shift from need to want was created. Woven into this notion are the beginnings of branding and marketing, with people like Josiah Wedgwood stamping their name all over the bottom of pottery and adding his branding onto all his business stationery, and beyond that in his direct mail information that would be sent to the direct public. I think he was the first person to do direct mail. And then, really significantly, going forward to the mid-1800s, we had the first fashion house, which was started by Charles Frederick Worth in Paris, and he was the first designer really to start the concept of fashion shows, and I think he had fashion shows 4 times a year. So I suppose naturally you have your fashion show in the first quarter of the year, then the next one, the next one, and the next one. So you're going to want to show your customers something new and something different, otherwise they don't have a reason to buy it. So I guess he kind of created the foundations of the behemoth of the fashion industry we have today. This isn't all in the book. I mean, these are my observations. So today we have autumn, winter and spring, summer seasonal fashion shows, but you have resort wear and pre-fall in between. So those are 4 regular catwalk sessions a year, which fuels the sort of the churn of fast fashion. And I'm just talking from, this isn't included in the book, but just talking about my particular experience as a designer. I would wait for the fashion shows to come out every few months. Every couple of months you've got a new set of catwalk collections coming out. So you'd be looking at trends and key shapes and prints and colours and silhouettes, and you would have to interpret those for your customers. And my customers were retailers, high street retailers, and so you can see back in the 1850s, Charles Frederick Worth started this system of fashion shows 4 times a year, and up to the present day it's sort of had this knock-on effect on the fashion industry, which is really quite interesting, very interesting to somebody like me who worked in the industry itself. So the section goes on to explore the rise in consumerism, fast fashion, online selling, and Patrick Grant talks about his own experience working in the fashion industry. As I mentioned before, he designed a menswear line for Debenhams. He talks about positive and negative reflections on that, which I guess he would probably use that knowledge to set up community clothing, I imagine. But it's just quite interesting to hear what he says about his experience in fashion. So the second section of the book is about quality, in which he explores quality in what it actually is, and he discusses how you've got 2 aspects. So you've got tangible and intangible. So tangible is obviously the physical aspects of quality, the function and the durability, and then you have the intangible aspects of quality, which I think are far more interesting in many ways. So you've got provenance. So where has this item, this, for argument's sake, this knitted jumper or this cotton blouse or this pair of jeans, where have they come from and who made it? If you buy them, you buy this item, where does the money go? What about the branding behind it? What's the story? And also the environmental impact. So those are the intangible aspects of quality, which I think in some ways are far more interesting and kind of quite nuanced. He explores how quality has changed with mass production, industrialisation and globalisation, and he calls it race to the bottom, and I quite agree with that. And the discussion is that mass production has taken away individuality, craft, personality, and ultimately at the end of the day, because these mass-produced items are so widely available and faceless, we have no idea where they come from. They're cheap and disposable, and they really mean very little to us as objects. So the third chapter of the, section of the book rather, is called Work, and it tackles how the very nature of work has changed over the last several hundred years. And he looks back at the 1500s, where we were predominantly an agricultural economy, and about 70% of the population would work within agriculture, but they would also have additional jobs as well alongside their main work in agriculture, and those would probably be spinning yarns, weaving fabrics, and repair work, repairing leather shoes or household items. So you can see back then, sort of over 500 years ago, before the Industrial Revolution hit hard, that your very existence and your day-to-day work were so entwined and interlinked, because your work would affect your quality of life really directly, which is really a really interesting thing to think about. And then if you zoom forward to the 1800s, where the Industrial Revolution is in full swing, you've now got an industrialised nation, and all those small makers, the weavers and the spinners, the weavers, and repair workers who did all those really significant vital jobs, have been replaced by wholesalers and retailers. There are, the artisan makers were diminishing, and it resulted in a loss of connection with where things come from, who makes them, how they're made, therefore no value, which goes hand in hand with the whole quality issue of mass production. And if you bring that idea forward into the 20th and 21st centuries, I mean, it's the age of automated mass production and offshore production, and I don't suppose anybody really knows where anything comes from anymore. Things get made offshore in some far distant country by a faceless person, by an absolutely massive corporation. And they may well be labelled artisan, and the products may be curated, which a lot of big companies seem to put those words into their ranges at the drop of a hat, but they really mean very little when the products themselves are actually shipped round from the other side of the world in shipping containers. That's my observation anyway. In the final section of the book, Less, Patrick Grant calls for a different way, less, better, local, a different way to move forward, stop the manic consumption, but also to maybe make ourselves, to repair, to resell, to swap and recycle. And I'm going to use a couple of quotes from the book, which I think are quite significant. Firstly, let's re-engage with craft where skill and knowledge matter, where the work is meaningful and respected, where consumers once again feel connected to the product. So we are therefore thoughtful and not thoughtless, and we care about the things that we buy. We understand them, we know where they come from, and we give them the value that they deserve. And then my final quote is, living with fewer, better things is an act of goodness and kindness to people and the planet, and it would make us all happier, which comes full circle to the very first section of the book that I mentioned at the very beginning. I loved this book. I enjoyed every minute of reading it, and I hope you decide to read it too, if you haven't already. On a personal level, it has really made me question and reflect on my consumption. I think, just to give it a bit of background, I was brought up by parents who grew up in the Second World War, and they had this attitude of reusing and repairing and sort of conserving things and not throwing things away all their lives. My father was an engineer and he was just brilliant. He could fix absolutely anything. My mum made clothes. She made our clothes, she made home furnishing, she made toys. She was just sort of a fantastic, to use, I don't know whether you can use this expression anymore, she was a homemaker, and she did go out to work as well. She was a professional woman too, but she was extremely talented. Alongside this, I had a very strong sense of my ancestors, my grandparents and my great-grandparents and uncles and great-uncles, and I have been handed down a lot of pieces of furniture and household items that I still have today. In my lounge I have in the corner, I have a beautiful button-back armchair that my mum, belonged to my grandmother. My mum probably recovered it 3 times. I recovered it about 15 years ago when I inherited it, and it's probably due another reupholster right now. It's great, and right next to it I've got my grandparents' standard lamp. I'm actually filming this in my bedroom today because it's the quietest place in the house, and I'm looking at my dressing table, which was from the other side of the family and belonged to my great aunt. And I treasure these things. I mean, we have a desk in the front room, the other front room, which is a home office, and it's my grandfather's desk. And I think it was probably his father's. I'm not 100% sure because I can't ask him now. But my husband now works at that very same desk 100 years later, which is fantastic. And you could never replace that item, however much money you had. I don't believe you could replace that item with something that you could buy in a retail store now, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, I also use a lot of my mother's cookware as well, and it just strikes me, when I was reading this book, it struck me that those things that I've inherited, I don't come from a particularly posh background, they weren't particularly wealthy, but all those items have stood the test of time. So they would have bought far fewer things back then, but they've lasted. I've got a beautiful brass and ceramic and glass oil lamp that belonged to my mother's side of the family, which would have illuminated my great-grandparents' parlour down in Wiltshire, and it still functions today. I can still use it, and it sits on top of my piano. And as I say, they weren't particularly wealthy, but that's an example of people buying high-quality items that stand the test of time. However, despite all this background and knowledge, I am guilty of succumbing to fast fashion. I have quite a lot of pieces from Zara in my wardrobe. I have been known to buy things in IKEA, which is the furniture version of fast fashion, I suppose. And for several decades I worked as a designer in the most commercial part of the fashion industry. I worked in fast fashion as a designer at the coalface. So I really have contributed towards this endless churn of fast fashion. And I, as a designer, I absolutely love clothes. And I think as a designer you have something in you that's always looking for the new and the next, and something that looks fresh and interesting and directional, and I can never going to suppress that. So my first decision I made, which was to stop buying fast fashion, is a tough one. Now, I haven't bought any fast fashion since the summer of this year, and I bought just a couple of vests in COS to go on holiday, just classic vest shapes. I'm kind of person who, when I find a classic item, I'll buy it in every colour. So that's the last fast fashion item that I have bought. So yeah, so my decisions include no more fast fashion, and I'm going to try to remember to buy things I need rather than want. We'll see how that goes. I've actually, as soon as I finished reading this book, I actually went through my wardrobe, which is right here, and I had a real cull. And I kept things that I considered would still be useful to me and that I know I'm still going to wear. And they're fast fashion items there. There's no point just chucking it away if it's perfectly good to wear and use. But I have donated some stuff to the charity shop. I've also sold a load of stuff on Vinted, and I intend to wear things until I can't wear them any longer or they are no longer of use, and then I will again donate them to charity or sell them on Vinted. But obviously, if you watch my channel, you know that I'm a maker of clothes. And so, yes, you can make your own clothes, but you're still consuming fabrics and threads and notions and trims, and somebody's got to manufacture them. So you're still contributing to this, aren't you? So this is something that I've been on board with for about a year or so. Dead stock fabrics, natural fibres, and a rejection of synthetic man-made fibres as far as possible, with the exception of some dead stock fabrics or maybe where materials are recycled. But it's a very complicated subject which I could do a whole other video on. In fact, I think I'm going to do a video on dead stock fabrics, what's dead stock fabric, where you can get it from, and that whole scene as well. So I want to move to a position of being thoughtful rather than thoughtless. So those are my intentions. So watch this space, we'll see how it goes. So I have, to conclude this review, I've got some further reading from you. So there's a link below to Patrick Grant's book, and I have got two other books in a similar vein that I've read. The first one is To Die For by Lucy Siegel. It's not that new. I think this is actually 2011, but it's still very relevant. I'll just read a bit of the back cover to you so you can get a sense of it. To Die For peels back the layers of the global wardrobe to reveal the naked truth about the big name luxury it brands we swear by and the cheap clothes we can't live without. It's a really, really good book. Link below. And then secondly, Fashionopolis by Dana Thomas. This is also excellent. This is more recent. Much more recent, 2019. Again, I'll just read a section from the back cover. Fashion has blighted our planet. Today, 1 out of 6 people on Earth work in fashion, churning out 100 billion garments a year, yet 98% of them do not earn a living wage, and 2.1 billion tonnes of clothing is thrown away annually. Those statistics may have altered slightly because this book was written about 5 years ago. However, I still think it's really relevant. And then another book, which I haven't read because I bought it on Sunday when I got sucked into a bookshop. I can never walk past a bookshop. And it's called Craftland by James Fox. It's a journey through Britain's lost arts and vanishing trades. I did actually read the first chapter last night and I can't wait to get into it. On the back cover, Britain was once a craft land. For generations, what we made with our hands shaped our identities, built our communities and defined our regions. Craftland chronicles the vanishing skills and tradition that used to govern every aspect of life on these shores. So I think that sits quite well beside less actually. So that's my next read after I've finished a book that I'm reading on Marie Antoinette, as you may know, for a future video that should be coming out quite soon. So that's my review. If you've read the book, please chip in and tell me what you think. And maybe we can start a bit of discussion below in the comments. Anyway, please like, share and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye.